Welcome to Mind My Age, presented by Total Life. Therapy focused on healthier aging and covered by Medicare. I'm your host, Neelam Brar, and today we have a very special guest, Bailey Parnell. Bailey is a speaker, a humanitarian, and digital well-being expert currently pursuing her doctorate of education in learning and organizational change. Bailey's TEDx talk, Is Social Media Hurting Your Mental Health?, has reached millions, shining a spotlight on the hidden dangers of social media use. Bailey, it's such a pleasure to have you with us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me, Neelam.
So, research has shown that maintaining a positive mindset can keep us physically healthier, happier, and even slow down aging. You've spoken about the effects of social media on mental health. How do you embody a positive mindset in your digital life, and how old do you feel today as a result?
Well, I feel a different age every day, but I think that, what happens in the world of social media and mental health is that this is often a conversation that happens at the high school level. Maybe they bring me into universities and they think that this is something exclusive to young people and especially teenagers. And I'm just so glad that you've invited me here today because people don't realize just how much of a factor this plays in everyone's social health. That includes even working adults. And yes, you know what? That includes aging members of our society as well as seniors, and especially folks who are retired. You see rising uses, maybe if they were filling their time a different way before and now we're not. So it's very much like a prominent part of everyone's life. Maybe the network changes and maybe the use cases changes that you're on, but it's all around for sure.
In your TEDx talk, you said social media is an unregulated space where we're all at risk. Can you share what led you to focus on the connection between social media and mental health?
Yeah, and we can even go through some of the risks and we can talk about how some of those risks are not just for young people, they are also for older folks. So, I think of social media like a risky behavior, like sex or drugs or alcohol. And in psychology, a risky behavior is very simply when you participate, you expose yourself to potential harm. And you know this better than most. That does not mean that it's all bad, but with something even like drinking, it means that yes, do I enjoy a glass of wine? Absolutely. But do I also know how to make this place safe? Do I also know the rules around it? Do I know my relationship with it? Do I understand the behind the scenes and have I grown up with it forever? Yes, I have. Well, when you are a participant of social media, you are exposing yourself to risks like anxiety and stress as a result of using, like depression, like feeling like you've been here forever and losing time, mindlessness, like, oh my gosh, where did my day go? That might lead to frustration. And that's just kind of you feeling the way that you feel as a result of using. There's also the exposure to risk like being cyberbullied or observing cyberbullying because you know that with emotional contagion, you only need to observe abuse for it to have a negative affect on your mental health. You don't even need to be the one being abused online. Many people here listening will know that sometimes you go online and all you see is negative news. Living in that space is a risk to mental health. And then again, it goes further into like stalking and all these things. So there's a host of risks from participating here. And these risks are also true for folks who are aging and retired. I cannot say this enough. Risks like anxiety and stress and the negativity still true for you. You are a living walking human with a brain. Cyberbullying, maybe even more so if you are producing content. People who are aging, especially for women and especially for people of color, the abuse will likely be about that thing, right? Um, Scams is another risk online. And I would call this a combination in the world of like misinformation, disinformation, scamming, and fraud. This is a rising risk for everyone because the quality of the scams are improving, but particularly seniors are most at risk there because of having not grown up with a level of digital literacy. Guess what another risk is? Comparison and self-worth. And it does not matter what age you are. It's really funny, and you may have even covered this in your work and on your podcast already, but it's almost like adults don't expect that when they end work or when they end that phase of their life and maybe they're entering their 60s or their 70s and they're like, they enter a new phase of self-comparison that they didn't expect. And they're like, well, I'm supposed to be past this. This is like this is like a young people's game. But then they end up in new communities and they're like, oh, well, that person seems to have built a really full life, or that person seems to have really traveled a lot, and they look really good for their age. Like all these sorts of things come up, and it's like a new wave of comparison that, guess what? Absolutely still happens to you, even if you're aging. Oh, they spend more time with their grandkids online. I wish mine would come visit me more. That's still very true, right? So these risks that are there for everyone make it a risky behavior. And the more you engage with a risky behavior, the more you need to understand it and put things in place so that you can get the benefits with less risk.
I think that's so important. And the fact that we are still learning how to manage our mental health um, while using these tools, which can be beneficial and helpful, but also can be harmful. The fact that we're layering in now generative AI into the social media equation, there's going to be a dramatic increase in the amount of content that's being created. What is your advice for folks that are finding, the social media exposure impacting their mental health?
Wow, where do we go? I think I could spend the entire rest of the podcast just talking on this and nothing else. Like, so the AI piece, the AI component in my work and at my nonprofit, and even in the TED Talk where you found me, I talk about 5 steps towards safe social. And in the TED Talk, it was 4, and we've since added, a fifth. And so the first place to start is by building awareness and understanding. It's almost quite similar, actually, to if we were talking about any other risky behavior, even like alcohol use. It's, do I even know what is going on here? So, do I even know what is a DM? Like to know so that when someone says I'm being abused in my DMs, that you know it means direct message. And with generative AI, it's kind of the same right now. Social media is considered contact one with generative and a large, I guess, public release of AI, if you will. Except that was just curation AI, which is putting together, generating for you ads and content that it thinks you will want to see based on things that you have clicked in the past, clicked or engaged with, or even that video that your friend or your daughter sent you on Facebook in your DMs, that becomes a recorded transaction attributing value. The generative AI part of it was that the ads-based system on social media decided that we were going to collect that data and deliver something back to you in the form of content and an ad. So social media is actually contact one with AI in a mass form, and it didn't really go well. Like, it's not going well. So knowing about it is the first step. Step 2 is moderating your consumption. Now, how to do that, seniors in particular, if you've not grown up with it and you're just suddenly finding yourself with more time, then you've not maybe explored all these ways that you can even change your settings, or you need someone to like, maybe not, maybe you aren't someone here who's digitally literate, but here's the key: digital literacy. Do I even know that something is an ad? You know what I mean? And to see something so small on the bottom that says sponsored, oh, you're on TikTok now, here's something I saw the other day. Seniors being on TikTok because their grandkids are on TikTok and they've been hearing a lot about it, and maybe their friends aren't on it, but they would like to consume now, and not even seeing that something has that tiny little sponsored logo there. So even the ability to identify an ad, for example, is part of the world of digital literacy. But step 3 is building the offline soft skills, the skills that will not matter what you are going through that day. If you have these skills built, skills like resilience and self-awareness, because this does not stop at any age, this continues to develop. Skills like mindfulness, skills, having offline things that you're passionate about and that take your time. All of these, having goals offline, no matter what the age. These things seem unrelated to social media use at first, but actually, in my research, how somebody felt about themselves at the time of use was the most important thing that indicated whether or not they would have a good or bad time on social media, as well as how good or how bad. So that meant, like, if I was already feeling lonely and I'm feeling like I haven't done much that day or isolated, then you are more likely to have a bad time on social media. Step four, and I ought to get into that one a little bit more too, because if you look at offline factors that would contribute to someone having a bad social media experience, let's look at senior population. And I realize there's a bit of generalizing here, and but there is increased loneliness and social isolation as people age. 100%. We already know this is an issue offline. Well, guess what happens? With things like retirement and loss of loved ones, maybe physical isolation, social media will come up almost feeling like a way to stay connected. And you're scrolling, but you're not actually connecting. Like we're connected online, but we're not connecting with other people. And weirdly, this can have the adverse effect of making us feel even more lonely with the things like comparison. It can be, you can become emotionally dependent for seniors on social media as like support validation, maybe even a distraction from real world problems. It can be a sense of escapism. There can be a reward system for any age. Gosh, girl, you got me going on and on. I feel like I could just, I didn't even finish step 4 and 5. Step 4 is modeling good behavior or leading by example. And again, doesn't matter at any age. How are you using this? Are you not using it? What do you think is okay to comment on someone else's photo? That is contributing to the digital space that we all live in. And step 5 is holding the responsible parties accountable. So like any risky behavior, if we actually want solutions here for any age, including senior social media use, then that would be a multi-pronged approach. That would be governments. That would be part of seniors' education. That would be when you're doing mental health care with seniors. That becomes part of the conversation, not just for your young people. That means that parents. That means that for your kids, it's a multi-pronged approach, like any risky behavior. So those are the 5 steps, and of course, any one step could be a whole podcast.
And you've rightly said a multiple number of items that I think about when I reflect on my mom being a little addicted to Facebook. The first thing she'll do when she's done her morning routine is she'll sit down in the couch in the living room and look at her phone, and hours are passing by. And she's commenting on a lot of random stuff. But what's really frightening to me is that mom doesn't really understand how Facebook works. And she certainly will never understand, or it'll be really tough for her to comprehend generative AI and all of the implications on how that will manipulate your behaviors. So, if for folks listening today that have a spouse or a loved one that is overusing social media, what's your advice on how to have this conversation with them and help them kind of find balance?
Yeah, okay, love this. Let's start with how to identify that there may or may not be a problem, with social media. And you could even call this signs of addiction, right? And if you go to our website, centerfordigitalwellbeing.org, there's actually a free resource there that is called Am I Addicted to Social Media? And, it's actually built through the lens of how we present signs of addiction to other risky behaviors, but with the idea of social media. So let me give you some example of some questions that would be on there. Do I black out and not remember what I saw in the last hour? To what degree does that happen? Like you're using and you're scrolling and not remembering. Do I put myself in physical danger because of use? Like, for example, have I bumped into someone, walked into a door? To what degree does this happen? Have I lied or manipulated situations so that I could go use? For example, I said I was going to the bathroom, but actually I just wanted to check social media. So let's go to seniors. How might we find what might be some signs of addiction? Excessive screen time, several hours a day on social media, not even realizing time has passed, is actually something that you just noted and is a sign of overuse. Neglecting real world relationships would be a big one. So like focusing on online interactions at the expense of in-person or real world. So have I ever on that assessment, you would see something like, has this negatively impacted my relationships? To, for example, has someone said like, "Hello, I'm talking to you," or "What are you doing?" or like, "Why did I even come visit you today if you're just going to be on your phone?" Like these would be subtle signs that I'm using at the expense of my mental health. Mood swings linked to social media. So if you're listening as yourself or you're listening because you want to observe a senior, um, feeling anxious, upset, irritable, if you're unable to check social media, using it to cope with emotional distress, feeling like, all right, well, I don't really know what to do right now, so I guess I'll just use compulsive checking, looking for new updates, comments, messages. Again, doesn't matter at any age. So that could be true for all of us. Now, even in younger ages, so once you've identified it, you're like, I think there's a bit of a problem here. Offline connection is the solution to a lot of the things I think that you probably talk about on your podcast, right? When it comes to senior living and loneliness and isolation and cognitive and memory and all of these things, it's like, am I connected offline to goals and purpose, really? Well, weirdly, you may not expect it, but that's actually a social media strategy as well. Like you're thinking, oh, my mom spends a lot of time online. Is there a way that I could talk to my own mom and be like, is there things that I can do with them together? Can we develop a hobby together? Is there like talk to me about the painting that you're doing? Like or my own mom, she used to make like jewelry and stuff like that, and make that the thing that is of interest to us. Um, Gosh, taking it to a good old phone call, or like we can take it to a video chat or something. Like these are not underrated ways to actually counterbalance the social media addiction. Is offline goals, purpose, connection. That's probably my number one thing. But then because of the awareness piece, if you are listening here and you are aware now and you're like, oh, I do see those signs, this is something, go find my TED Talk. Doesn't have to be my TED Talk. Go take something like that and actually do some learning. Like just because someone is 60 doesn't mean that they've done the learning on this. Like there's no way. If it's not been a point of contention, like a point of interest in their life, it's very likely that whether you're 60 or 16 or 20, like even if you're 46, I've literally done this education with every single age. So I know that nobody knows what's going on here. Now that you're listening, okay, well, let me talk to my mom about what it means to have balance online. Let me help them do some digital literacy because I do know that there are some scams coming out. And you know what? I'm going to send you an article that I want you to read. Or, depending on the digital literacy of the person you're concerned about, I'm printing you out an article that I want you to read. And, keep an eye out on these scams. You might see things. If anyone is ever asking you for money, if I want you to learn how to double check a URL. You don't know what this is? Oh, you think if they give you, snarky remark, you're like, I know what a URL is. Great, perfect. Sorry, let's move on. But this is what we're doing because I do know that you are more at risk in certain ways. Even setting limits, but this is like pending your own situation. Obviously, if someone has like, if you're still self-governing, you can only suggest so much, but then they have to do it. But you might say like Neela, me sharing, if I was to share with my mom, like I set limits, mom. I set limits or I set notifications. And do you want me to show you how? Like it's just like sharing the strategies that we use, promoting of the awareness and all that sort of stuff. So I hope that there's some useful nodes in there.
Oh, absolutely. I think like just even having a mechanism to initiate the conversation in a way that doesn't get shut down, as you said, like you don't want a snarky comment in response, but it's so important to get through and help everyone improve, whether they're younger or older. And also be willing to recognize the problem, right? And because a lot of people are in denial.
Yeah, because here's the thing, you might go to somebody, especially, someone who's older And this is, I suppose, just giving feedback in general. Like, this is not even just about social media, but a good, easy way into this for you might just be, again, talking about something that you have learned recently, like listening to this wonderful podcast episode and being like, we were talking about seniors, we were talking about how they're, increased risk of loneliness and therefore and that social isolation transfers over to social media use. You're at increased risk of scams online. And also because you're not taught in school, like my 10-year-old niece right now, about negativity bias of social media and about filter bubbles. Let me just, like, is this something that you think about? Like, get their real opinions on it? Because you are still a person, even though we're aging, right? And that might be an easy way in. And another easy way in is to focus on the behavior instead of focusing on the person. Because no matter at what age, if you're like, Mom, you're addicted, this isn't good for you, then you're gonna get some defensiveness about their character. I do other things, Neelam. Like, you're gonna get this kind of stuff, right? I do other things, but it's like, I have noticed that when I'm here, that there's a lot of use. Like, how do you feel after use? Like, does that make you feel good, or like, why are you using, or like, what are you interested in, or what are you following, would actually be something that I would engage with as a researcher and person interested in this. And you're more than welcome to steal those questions.
I love that. And I think having just prompts that are non offensive but still productive is so important to have in our back pocket. You've said social media isn't free, it's costing us our mental health. What steps can our listeners take today to start protecting their mental health while staying connected?
Yeah, and that's exactly why what you just said there about while staying connected is the whole other half of this conversation. So, I take a harm reduction approach, and there's a reason for that. And that means that I know there's also a lot of good here. And I literally would be the biggest hypocrite if I told you all, get off social media, that's the only way that your mental health is going to grow. Well, no, I know that's wrong, because I was literally found on social media to be on this podcast. You found me on YouTube, and then we connected on LinkedIn. So I'm someone who actually experiences the benefits of this connection and community. 100%, this can happen. Learning. My mother-in-law follows Bollywood stars and cooks, and she's like improving even at uh, she's like 50 something and she's a fabulous cook, but she's like into this. So she's found now a way to connect her offline interests and hobbies, and she's designing, maybe she's not even doing it with intention, although she's heard all my stuff, so maybe, but she's designing a social media space that actually serves her mental health, whether she realizes it or not. Like, who do I love? What do I want to see? What brings me joy? What are my hobbies? What are the things I want to learn about? If following the news stresses you out, that does not need to be something that you follow on social media. You can continue getting that from wherever else you're getting that. That does not need to be your social media space. But so focusing on those good, to your question about like, how do we stay connected and not at the expense of our mental health? First off, you go follow those 5 steps, those things that we talked about. This awareness here, even right now, helps you understand that, wait, I do have some control in the space that I build for myself. I don't need to be friends. I don't care if you're on Facebook right now or we're talking Instagram, wherever. You do not need to follow people because you worked together 20 years ago. Guess what I tell 26-year-olds? You do not need to be friends with someone on Facebook because you went to high school together. And that same feeling of obligation continues throughout every age right now. So you can create a space that serves you, where you are seeing people that you want to see, and you're following brands that interest you. Like, my Instagram feed is mostly not people that I know. It's like National Geographic travel bloggers and like some family, like, all that stuff, even though I post a lot of stuff that's unrelated to that, right? So you can do that. You can focus on the good that you get from this and make that the main purpose. And then tune in with yourself, or tune in, whether, even if it was your services that you offer, right? Like, if you're tuning in with self-awareness and how you think about things and how you're feeling, I promise you that will follow you into your social media use. And it may seem, again, seemingly unrelated, that the number one strategy I would give you is to build an offline life that you love and offline self awareness, but I promise you it'll follow you there.
It's almost like you're saying, have a great real life and complement it and use social media to improve your access and knowledge and awareness on those topics so that you can actually employ them in your real life.
Well, yeah, it should definitely serve you. Like, it's funny. Maybe I should be, I guess, clearer or more distinctive, because if I talk to young folks, they don't see the difference between like my online life and my offline life. Like, it's just life. So. So, whereas when I talk to older folks or even go to a parents' night or something like that, they still often see like I'm online, and sometimes there's actually a disconnect between how they're behaving online and how they're behaving offline. And sometimes we're behaving online in ways that we would never behave offline. And I actually think, to your point there, strengthening who you want to be offline and online is actually the same. Like, to your point, if you are interested in gardening, do you know how many amazing content creators there are for gardening? I learned how to propagate a plant because of because of YouTubers. So I had no idea how to do that before. So this would be a very positive thing in your life. And connecting with people is also a positive thing in your life. So if you're following people or things are showing up in your feed that are serving disconnection, that are making you upset with your community, I would say that's an absolute red flag, because most people are good, and you would not believe that after 3 hours on social media.
Well, and that's really interesting because like in the real world, if you have an interaction that's not good with an individual, you mentally record that and you make sure, you avoid that person in the future and you take action in a way, right? Whether it's informally or formally. But have when you watch a reel on social, you might not immediately take a step, and then you'll get that reel again tomorrow and again, and you're allowing that negativity into your life or something that doesn't serve you into your life a lot easier than you do in your real life.
You're right. You see it, and the more that or I guess I should say, the less digital literacy that you have, which happens to correlate with age, just right now in history, just a weird time of history where people who are older didn't grow up with it. That won't always be the case, but the less digital literacy you have, the more at risk you are for that what I would consider mindless social media use. You don't have the muscle yet to see something that bothers you on TikTok and to click the button and to click see less of this. Now I realize there's a balance, because what a filter bubble is you receiving more of the things that you like. So what I want you to do is understand that most things in life are about balance. And if you're seeing something that it I think you, like, that you don't want to see anymore, and it actually makes you feel bad about yourself, it's increasing your comparison, it's you leave social media and you just can't figure out why you're feeling so frustrated. Like, I want you to see less of those on your feed. I want you to unfollow or mute if you don't want them to see that you unfollowed them. Like, I want you to do that and create a digital space that serves you. I want you to also be aware that there is this thing called a filter bubble. So if I am seeing something about a politician, I most certainly want you to go to a trusted news source or a couple and see that that thing is actually true. Because just because someone had said it on social media doesn't make it true. That's misinformation and disinformation. So there's a balance, right? I create a feed that serves me, a digital space that helps my mental health and the things that I like and want to learn, and my connection, my community. But I also know, just by listening to this podcast, what a filter bubble is, and that I might be at risk for thinking the world is on fire because I've seen 10 posts in a row that say it is, even though those 10 posts might just have been served to you because you clicked it yesterday.
Well, also being intentional about why you're opening up Instagram and what you're hoping to achieve by being on that app. Because it's really, it's too many people wake up and the first thing they do is start scrolling. And now you're letting an algorithm decide how you start your morning.
Love that. I absolutely love that. You are like I'm very big into just in my own life, like peak performance, mindset. I see that you are kind of into this as well. Like what can I do from a body, mind, spiritual, emotional, all of the lenses so that I can operate and live a thriving life. And what that, in my mind, what you just said is why I choose how my day is going to go. This is wild for some people, but I think you can choose how your day is going to go at the beginning of the day. That's how much I like. So you're saying, why am I going to let 50 people on the internet who might be less happy than me, who might be really upset, who might be angry, who might be haters, who might just be that aunt that you don't really like. Like, there might be all these people. Why would I let them program the first hours of my day and carry that energy forth? So that's a really cool thing. Everybody, you should re-listen to that.
So, what's a personal story from your own life where you've led or had to deal with social media induced stress or anxiety, and how did you overcome it?
One that might be relatable to everyone is just whenever there's a huge news story, pandemic, it's happening in the Middle East, I felt like compelled, like I needed to know. And why this one's probably coming to mind is because there's just always something. There's always something new. But those ones in particular, people felt like, and I did too, I'm not being a good citizen if I'm not online. Like I need to know what's happening moment by no, moment by moment, and therefore I need to be on social media. And I was starting to find myself having signs that I was overusing because of things that are not natural for me, like even like tech neck, like tech neck that I get because you're looking down at your phone so much, and I just would notice that because I'm in tune with self-awareness. That's why those things follow you on social media. Scrolling and then closing it, and then I would literally close it and I would reopen the same app literally after I just closed it. Like I would close Instagram, click it, open Instagram, and I was like, oh my gosh, like what am I doing? And but the prompt was because I was building that pattern when there was really big news stories. What I would do about it is do something offline. Like I would intentionally set something offline, as in like I'm going to see a movie, or I am going to, that's it, I'm unfollowing the news networks here. I'm going to get a daily news digest to my email, which is what I do. I'm not uninformed, and I'm not ignorant to, my governments, for example, but I'm understanding that it is a risky behavior to use social media, and I'm mitigating the risks. And I found that a lot of people, that very, very simple thing surprised people when this stuff goes down, because they felt like, oh, I need to know what's going on in my community. Well, how did you know about it a year ago? Right? So if you're totally fine and you go on and you have absolutely no problems, okay, great, go online. But I would say that's something that's common where I notice I'm having a use. There was a point where my husband and I realized that we were having opposite reactions to what was happening on social media. And I talk about this in the TED Talk. And I liked to follow like travel bloggers and even style bloggers. Like it doesn't come naturally to me. Like somebody show me, put this together, show it to me, love that. I didn't know I wanted to travel there. Like that's who I wanted to follow on social media. But way back when I first met my husband, he was the exact opposite of me. He did not want to follow celebrities and influencers because at the time he was engaging in social comparison, and it was making him feel bad about himself. And so the social media strategies that would be recommended for both of us would literally be opposite. And that's why self-awareness is so important here. So for me, I had to take my own advice that I told you earlier. I don't need to follow that aunt or that cousin because they are my cousin, when the stuff they're posting to me is creating a more hateful, more pressed world. And his advice would have been, you need to unfollow those bloggers and reconnect with the people who, bring you joy online. So I suppose it's really tailored, isn't it?
It really is. And again, it goes back to that self awareness of what your intentions are and what you want to achieve by being on these platforms, it could be entertainment, but then like just like TV, you should monitor that entertainment time rather than channel surfing as we've done on TVs as well. So looking ahead, what trends do you see in social media and the impact on mental health, especially for older adults?
Yeah. Of course, you mentioned generative AI, and what I study is how I do study in my doctorate how generative AI could be used in slightly unrelated, but in learning and leadership contexts. However, through that work and through the digital well-being stuff I do, I am very probably my chief concern right now is well, two that I just want everyone to be aware of, like especially seniors because of a correlation with less digital literacy. I'm very, I am very worried about misinformation and disinformation. Uh, Disinformation is the spreading of fake news or fake photos or just made up stories unintentionally. And that's because it might be served to you and, well, your cousin shared it and you trust them. Well, that doesn't make it true. Now, that's disinformation. Misinformation is done with malintent. Now, why I'm especially worried about this is democracies, actually. Democracy is we're getting into a whole other area of my work right now, kind of a more global leadership consultancy understanding. But y'all, democracies are something that you have to fight for. You actually have to work for them. And democracy is it is built on a shared understanding of truth. And if we, because we present the truth and we debate on how to go about it. That is what it should be. So I'm very concerned right now about that. But for you, what that means is like it actually matters how you vote here. It matters that you pay attention to this stuff. It matters that when they are talking about the role that AI is going to play or social media is going to play, that matters for you too. It really does. It matters that when you're upset about what a politician or what someone has said a politician has done on social media, that you have me and Neelam in the back of your head going, but let's just make sure. You know what? Let me read the platform because I don't know. Well, I've seen 10 videos in a row of this president doing that. Must be true. No, no, no. That's what I'm worried about for the future. So I want you all to have us in your head being like, just because I saw it on social media doesn't make it true. Let me go elsewhere.
I was going to say, just as a follow-up to that, like it's become really critical now that there are first source reference sites available for people to go fact check against. And like historically, we've assumed that the knowledge we're receiving is correct. With generative AI, there's just no chance that you can get away with not checking.
You cannot get away with not checking anymore. I like the way that you've worded that because some people are going to say there's no way you're going to know. There is a way. So here's two places you can start. Factcheck.org and Snopes.com are at least two trying to fact check the stories that happen online. But fortunately, the second thing I was worried about is generative AI. It's kind of connected to the first because if you can create content that's fake, that looks more believable than misinformation, disinformation, and the harms to democracy becomes an even bigger threat. Now, here's one thing I want to encourage you with because we got to keep it optimistic. In generative AI, even though I have concerns, absolutely, I also get fortunately to deal with a lot of the positive uses of AI. The dark side of social media, the dark side of AI is always the dark side of people who use it, who code it, who decide that profit is more important than people, who post and who make this content, the people who have X, Y, and Z. And so, I also know that there are companies who are right now building AI products to specifically fact check other AI. So imagine building an AI to police another AI. That sounds really wild, but in a world of AI generated content, you and me via eyes, are not going to be able to detect when something is fake. Therefore, what we need is Facebook don't even get me going. This like with a fervor, I believe this. Meta, Google, all of these companies that are delivering any kind of online news should be the ones funding the AI fact checking companies. And there should absolutely, even before it gets to you, if it is created or suspected of being created with AI, because we now have other AI that's saying, like, oh, well, how is this put together? Um, well, that should be a notice right there, front and center. That's at least one place to start. Is it going to evolve? Yeah. Are you going to ask me this question in 5 years? Yeah, and I might have different answers because it's happening while we are living right in this very moment.
And like regulating it is a difficult question too, because there's going to be countries that don't regulate. And so, if we want our technology and innovation to continue to grow and evolve, giving people the freedom to continue to innovate is important. So you've got to be so careful about what sort of regulations come in.
You're right, and it affects older people too. It affects seniors. To think that, like, you don't have to care about this, like, you have to care about it for yourself. And at least for myself, I just, believe in a moral responsibility to create a better life for the kids coming down the line and the next generation. Like, that's just how I live myself, and that I feel that feeling will only get stronger as I age. And so, for example, one of the regulatory things that has been slowly shifting over the last 10 to 20 years now, if you can believe, but let's say 10 years, is countries saying, let's even go before AI, just with social media in general. They were starting to say, especially over in Europe, like, we are going to start regulating social media based on where the service is consumed, not where it is delivered from. This is actually a really, really important distinction in online services because it means that if I am providing a service to people in the country of Canada or the US, then I have to abide by Canada's laws. Whereas before this, I could say, oh, I operate over in probably Ireland because of low corporate tax laws. I only need to follow their rules. And it's okay, whatever you're consuming doesn't matter. This is regulation that is changing because then it means that our governments matter. It means that the decisions that the US government or if Canadian government, I'm Canadian living in the US right now, the decisions they make actually affect Canadians and Americans and that they hold the companies accountable.
It's very true. I mean, you earlier touched upon fraud even, and when seniors might be thinking, like, how does generative AI apply to me? It's become really easy to mimic a loved one's voice, and make them say whatever you need them to say to a very convincing manner. And that to sort of a call of desperation or from a loved one could drive you to do anything. And so being able to recognize that this might be fake, even if your ears are telling you it's not, is so important. And it's going to feel really uncomfortable to be able to not take something seriously when it sounds really serious because it's fake. I mean, we're just scratching the surface on how much is going to change in social media with generative AI as also in how you live your day-to-day life. There will be some positives and there will be a lot of things we need to adjust for. So what are some final thoughts for our listeners that you'd like to share?
My final thought would be resist the fear that comes from overwhelm when you hear this conversation. Some of you are going to think that's just too much for me. Like, I'm not going to get into that. But I would encourage you to override that fear and just take a chance. Go do a quick little Google search. You're listening here, so I already trust that you're a curious person who's into personal development and being better and living better. But there is going to be a lot of fear in the next 10 years. Oh gosh, probably longer. But I'm just letting you know that's going to come. And it's because with more information, we override that fear. So that would be my final words. We can't cover everything right now, and it's going to change. That's the reality. That it's going to change. So when you're feeling afraid and you're feeling like, not my problem, give it a moment, take a minute, come back to it.
Bailey, thank you so much for sharing your valuable insights on digital wellness and mental health. For our listeners, if you're facing challenges with social media or you're confused about how generative AI may impact you, reach out to the resources available at the bottom of this podcast. And if you're having it impact your mental health, please reach out to Total Life. Our expert therapists are available to support you, and services are covered by Medicare. Don't forget to hit subscribe for more episodes on healthier aging. And remember, age with purpose and balance because your best years are still ahead.